the idea.
Now recording. Okay, this is the Unseen Podcast, episode 30. It is 31. It is October 30th, 2015. I am your host, James Garrison. This is an unscripted, unedited, Creative Commons, open participation spinoff of the WOW Signal. Please go, for more information on that, please go to the wowsignalpodcast.com. If you want to be in the panel pool for this show, please email to unseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can go to unseenpodcast.com for more information. So tonight's special guest, and it's pretty much an entire panel of special guests. We have, first of all, looking on my screen, we have David Flora from Blurry Photos Podcast. We have Webb from Paranormal Skeptic Academy.
Good evening.
We have Marsha Barnhart.
How you do? Good to be here.
We have regular contributor and Mike Bohler from Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy. I hope I got that one right this time.
A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy, yes. Hello, everyone.
And we have Paul Carr from a little show called the WOW Signal Podcast.
It's good to be on the panel for once.
Okay. And as I mentioned tonight, the topic is just open topic, and we figured we'd get in the Halloween spirit by, one, having the drinking game going, two, by just talking about cryptids. So, in case anybody in this group, in the audience, is curious or doesn't understand what they are, cryptids are basically unknown monsters like the Loch Ness Monster, chupacabras, Bigfoot, things that are part of folk stories, mythology, urban legends, things like that.
Now, James, you say unknown, but there's plenty of TV shows that beg to differ.
Yeah, and there's TV shows that say a man from another planet has superpowers too, but...
Well, if it wasn't, they wouldn't put it on TV if it wasn't true.
And yet Donald Trump's on TV.
Touche.
So,
No,
him and that orangutan. Him and that orangutan is a running gag on here. So we're trying to start a Kickstarter to send his toupee, or send him to another planet and let his toupee run for office. So, okay, David, Flora, you guys run a show called Blurry Photos. Care to tell everybody a little bit about what it's about?
Sure thing. Blurry Photos is a weekly show, a weekly podcast where we take a topic of Forteana or conspiracies, cryptids. We do a lot of cryptozoology, unknown, unexplained phenomenon, things of that nature. And each week we'll delve into a subject and do a lot of research on it, try to present that research with all of the information that is kind of, let's say, fanciful, and then we try to chisel that information down to the truth behind what could be the legends or what could be the stories actually. So we like to bring a little bit of humor to it. Both of us have done improv in the Chicago comedy scene, so we take a lighthearted approach. We like to take the subject seriously and really get the information out there. We also, do some fart jokes. So,
and you've got a partner named Dave Stecco.
My co-host is Dave Stecco.
Okay. So, and C Webb or Chris, which do you prefer to be called?
Whatever's easier for you.
I've listened to you for a long time as C Webb, so that pops into my head.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. And would you care to tell people a little bit about your show?
Yeah, basically, I talk shit about paranormal reality shows in a fun, humorous, and informative way, point out how ridiculous they are, all the errors and flaws in their logic and reasoning, and try to apply a little scientific skepticism to them and present them in a way that people find entertaining.
And you've done a couple shows recently on one of my guilty pleasures, Finding Bigfoot.
I think Finding Bigfoot is probably one of the most frustrating shows out of all the paranormal reality shows I've done because of how blatant and obvious they are in their fallacies and how they put out information. I think it's probably one of the most frustrating.
So that's why it's successful. Okay. They're trolling you, man.
7 seasons is pretty successful, if you ask me.
Yeah, like you said in the past, and like I've said a couple of times, if I didn't have morals, I'd have a lot of money. So
yeah, I agree. Jeez, damn, ethics keep getting in the way.
Yeah. Okay, and then Marsha, by odd chance, do you happen to have a show?
No, I do not have a show. I hang out with Paul every once in a while for a couple of podcasts. One we have with the Aerial Phenomenon Investigations team. I'm a co-producer on that with Paul. And then, I hang out with Paul here on Google Plus with this program. I'm absolutely not a scientist, but I do have a lot of questions, and I'm, I will probably have an interesting discussion with you guys tonight because I kind of have experienced weird things, so I know weirdness happens, and I don't know about Bigfoot and all that, but I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so that James Patterson film came out in my neck of the woods. It was pretty much gospel where I grew up, but what did we know?
I'm familiar with the Patterson Gimlin film. So okay, and now Mike, would you like to tell people a little bit about your show right quick?
Sure. A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy it's where I take a conspiracy, kind of dissect it, try to delve into the history on on the history side of the conspiracy world. Most of them, they try to attack the science and so on, but I kind of, since that's kind of done to death, there's plenty of other shows out there you could be watching where if you want to get the science and stuff. So I try to focus on the history side of conspiracies and why they're wrong.
Okay. And Paul.
Well,
your turn.
Yeah. Well, I
resident rocket scientist.
I'm the producer of this dumb little crappy podcast called Unseen Podcast. But I'm going to let James Garrison do that from now on. I also have the WoW thing. I have worked with Marsha on something called API Case Files, which I hope you guys will listen to without too much derision. We try to be serious and I think skeptical on that, but without being derisive. The WoW Signal is my first podcast and my first love, and there I seek out people who are smarter than me to talk to, and of course there's so few of them that I can barely put it out once a month. Today I just talked to Martin Elvis, an astrophysicist, who one of those rare people who are smarter than me, and I will have that out soon. We talked about asteroid mining, and it should be a lot of fun. So tune in. Okay. WowSignalPodcast.com.
Okay. So, real quick question, straight across the board. What's your favorite cryptid or creature? David?
Well, my favorite one, I think he can be classified as a cryptid in that people aren't very sure what he was. Is probably Spring-Heeled Jack. And Spring Hill Jack was definitely humanoid, maybe human, maybe just a drunk Irishman with springs in his shoes.
Don't knock a drunk Irishman.
Especially with those springs in their shoes.
No judgment here. I like the guy. But since nobody knew for sure, that's kind of why he falls under the cryptid category. And he just his manner of what he did. He just went around slapping cops, feeling up women, and shooting fire on people's faces, and then jumping away. And nobody figured out, who he was or why he was doing this.
Hey,
Who was the first X-Men?
I was young. I was foolish.
That's right.
You needed the money.
You don't look that old, Paul.
I'd have to say Spring Hill Jack.
I don't have the energy to do that anymore. That's sure.
Get better boots.
Paul was actually the inventor of the lifts. But anyway. Okay. Chris, do you have a favorite?
Well, I have a casual observance of cryptids from shows like Monster Quest and Skeptoid. But if I had to pick a favorite, it would have to be the interdimensional traveling Bigfoot that's been known to bounce from here to there.
I have a friend who claims to have run into that.
Well, yeah, the fact that it can travel between dimensions is pretty exciting, and would be a hell of a scientific find if we ever able to prove that.
Yeah, I'll talk about it in a little bit, because I work with a Bigfoot researcher.
Oh,
I was trying to get I got him to actually come in last year to one of our skeptics in the pub and speak to us. It's the only time I've ever seen anybody in the paranormal realm, after my wife got done with him, actually go, I don't know. But
well, that's impressive, because how do you research something that doesn't exist as outside of studying the folklore of it or the cultural aspects of it? But the fact that they have these groups called the Bigfoot Paranormal or Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and specifically talking about Moneymaker and his crew, the back talking and the constant contradictions, just even amongst themselves, is so blatantly obvious that it's hard for me to believe that people actually believe what these people are saying and take them seriously.
No, I agree with that. And with my background in, I do wildlife animal management. Basically, I've tracked everything from rabbits and cats and stuff up to cougars and wolves and humans. I've seen weirdness, I'll admit it, but I've gone and seen what it was. A lot of times it ends up being an owl or a coyote or a wolf, or that was different, and I just needed the money. But anyway, I've never seen anything to convince me that there's an 8-foot tall hominid walking around the country. I know a couple of guys that are pushing 8 foot, but I've never seen a creature out in the woods. And I've spent a lot of time out there, doing hunting and everything else. But yeah, it's just one thing that what amazes me is the fascination people have with it and the belief they have in it. And even when you can show, like, if somebody brings you tracks and you go, yeah, I know what made this, it's a bear track, they still believe that it's a Bigfoot. And they're like, my favorite one so far, and I'd mentioned this, was it 2 weeks ago, Paul? My favorite theory on Bigfoot so far is that Earth is a penal colony, not penile colony, but a penal colony, that Bigfoot and humans are inmates here. The Bigfoot, or else the Bigfoot's an escaped alien pet, and it is transdimensional, like Chris was talking about, and can phase in and out of this realm of existence.
Well, if you make it paranormal enough, you can explain anything about it, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's just
but
adding free variables to the model.
Yeah, but I mean, it hits a point where you're kind of going, how much more can you make up? You're starting to sound like it's starting to sound like a political race.
Don't doubt the ability of people to make stuff up.
Yeah, they'll make just enough stuff to keep the belief alive.
Well, what I like is and one of the reasons I asked Mike to come on is what I like is when they pull in a government conspiracy attached to the cryptids. That one blew my mind.
Oh yeah.
Like, have you heard of the Missing 411 book?
Yeah.
That same guy that's a Bigfoot researcher, is friends with the guy that wrote it. And, he thinks that some of the disappearances are because Bigfoot took the people and that the government is covering it up. I think I had an aneurysm when he said that, because I haven't been able to focus straight on it.
Well, and I think he even adds on there that 9 times out of 10, there's black helicopters that are sighted right after, someone goes missing or whatever. And then you get, this commando squad that parachutes in and is just like hop, 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 and clears everybody out. And it's like, don't ask questions. And I don't know.
Or the Men in Black.
Or the Men in Black show up.
Yeah.
What's fascinating about the government aspect? How can the government both be this cynical, calculating entity, but also incredibly incompetent at the same time?
Well, that's because people say there's bifurcation. You've got one section of the U.S. military that's above board and everyday Joe. And then it is said, and I don't know, but it is said that there is a small faction of a group that is very, very off the grid, so to speak.
Above top secret.
Well, I don't give it a particular name, but it would not. That would not be a big stretch for me, knowing the military. It would not be a big stretch for me.
Yeah, Marsha's an Air Force veteran of what, 20 years?
14 active duty, but I worked within the military for 20 some years. Okay. But I don't trust them.
Yeah, this is the same government that couldn't hide oral sex in the White House. I mean, come on.
But that's the other section of the government that's incompetent and inept and a
those
bunch
are the politicians
of craven politicians.
It's the smoke screen.
That's a whole different stripe.
Yeah, that's
your idiot faction.
It's the Wizard of Oz.
I was going to say, I wouldn't call it a smoke screen. It's some other kind of screen.
That was sort of like the wag the dog, so to speak.
Is that what they call it now? But okay. But like I said, I'm not saying that there isn't like a black ops in the military. My dad's former military. He was through the Air Force, but he was a sniper. So I don't. Yeah, I know there's there's black ops. There's all sorts of special forces and little divisions in the military. But the fact is, basically, I can't remember who it was who said it, but the only way to keep a secret between 3 people is to kill the other 2.
Well, I disagree. I disagree on that. And there's a very simple process, and it's very effective, and it's been in effect for generations, and it's compartmentalization. And if you give somebody a tiny piece of the puzzle, they do not know what that is, but they carry it with them, and they know it, and they husband it, and they present it when they're told to present it. And when they present their piece of puzzle, which they know nothing of, to others who have the piece of puzzle, then that makes a picture. And nobody knew the secret they were holding until all these pieces get together, and they're not supposed to know. So I would submit, although I have no proof, that compartmentalization is the method that has kept secrets since time immemorial in the military, for sure. And it's alive and well.
Yeah. Well, we all know secrets get out because...
If you know a secret, it does. If you don't know a secret, it doesn't get out. If you don't know what you have as a secret.
Well, we don't know what we don't know until we know it, right?
Exactly. There are known knowns, there are unknown knowns, and there are unknown unknowns.
So at this point, the default position should be that there are no unknown knowns that we don't know about. So unless we have proof of these unknown knowns, then we should be skeptical of this black area of the government.
Well, I would say rather that there are unknowns. There are unknown unknowns. We know that. There are unknown unknowns. I know that. I
Well, there's
can't
stuff
say
that
them
goes
because they're
on.
unknown.
Well, there's stuff that goes on that we don't know about, but I think it comes down to is what's the motive of these unknowns.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Is it some?
Who knows?
you talk to people who've been in the black world, they'll tell you that it's not as exciting as you think. A lot of it is very dull, but it has to be kept secret for intelligence reasons.
Well, see, Chris is former military also.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years active duty in the Army. I was computer networking, so I didn't see too much unknown knowns.
Yeah, well, I've known people. I've known lots of people who have had very high level clearances, and they say, if I told you everything I knew, it'd put you to sleep. It's just it's just a lot of details about various things that you can't let your adversaries know, but it's not.
Well, it brings it back to cryptids.
It doesn't involve anything paranormal.
Right. So what would the government's motive be to hide information about a cryptid or something paranormal? That's what you have to question first. What are their motives?
Yeah, I don't see any motive at all. I mean,
well, one of the things that's been thrown out there is that Bigfoot is some sort of super soldier that the government has manufactured, and it's either being tested or being honed, as it were, or maybe they're just getting loose.
Isn't that the plot from the $6 Million Man?
Well, except that Sasquatch and Bigfoot has been around well before the military was doing any super soldier stuff. It is handed down from native folklore for hundreds of years. This is not a recent phenomenon. That thing has been around a while.
They have stories. A lot of the native tribes have stories of a hairy man or something along that lines, where the description is kind of similar to a Bigfoot, but it's not anything like the modern descriptions are.
Uh-huh.
And the thing is, especially like in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of the tribes had a tradition where the people who were going to become shamans went out into the woods for years. And they didn't have any contact with the tribe until it was a very long spirit walk or quest walk. And then after a few years, they would come back, and of course the hair is going to have grown. They're going to be wearing hides and everything and look pretty, honestly, if we were to walk into them right now, they'd be pretty freaky. So, but, some of those tribes have got, and it may be like the hairy man legends come from people running into the shaman. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, the thing is, it's a lot of supposition as to when you look at the old stories, if they're actually relating back to a Bigfoot or a lake monster or something like that, because they also had spirits of the forest, spirits of the water, the trees, that were just cultural legends. And they're things that every culture has because we all come from a common root ancestors.
Uh-huh.
So I've read a lot of the old legends. I grew up in Arizona around Apache and Navajo, and they've got stories of large hairy men.
Well,
my thing is out there.
Sorry, James. So going back to what you're saying about these stories, of native peoples about what's going on with these creatures in the wilderness. So I'll reference Finding Bigfoot specifically because what these people do, they tend to rely on expert witnesses, and they seem to put this reverence over native peoples, and that they knew something that we don't know now, and somehow we should just take what they say, which is folklore and tradition passed down through generation, as truth. But in the end, we don't.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of those programs, we can all agree, should just be out of hand dismissed, because right at the front, Antonio Paul had been asked to be in something like that. And when he took a look at the contract, he had enough sense to say, no way, because what you do is you check your ethics and your honesty at the door. You sign on the dotted line, and the producer's going to do what the producer needs to do to make sure this gets some revenue.
Oh, yeah.
And so at any point in time, I would think that those things they just need. Those shows are crap, I tell you.
Yes. Well,
Yeah. I mean, things are also
Yeah.
running on a bias too. They go into an area assuming that there's a Bigfoot or another creature there. And I've seen episodes where they go, oh, only a Bigfoot could do that. And I'm kind of looking at that going, and so could a 16-year-old who's out to prank people.
Yeah. Or a fox in heat.
Yeah, well, I don't know that fox in heat could bend a bird feeder bar, but, you know, a bear.
I'm just talking noises.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of the noises are, I mean, a friend of mine was sending me some of the Bigfoot howls. My father-in-law walked in. He heard that, and he kind of stopped, and he goes, you know what that is? I'm like, no. He goes, I've shot that.
Elk.
I'm like, okay. Exactly. It was an elk. It was a cow elk, which does not sound feminine or small in any way. They sound like they're about to rip your head off.
Yeah, those shows are crap. You know, you can't spend a lot of time trying to mine that for any credence.
Well, I mean, after 7 years calling it Finding Bigfoot, shouldn't they rename the show?
Failing to find Bigfoot.
Not Finding Bigfoot.
Oh,
God. Still looking. Maybe they should just take out a Craigslist ad looking for Bigfoot.
But let's talk a little bit about, if we could, some of the, you know, well, it is a pseudoscience area for sure, but there has been a group of people. I know there was this guy, and I think I'd mentioned this on the Google Plus site, a professor, I believe, out of Montana, who is a specialist in large animals or something like that. And I think, I can't remember. Meldrum, yes. Now,
he wants to build a dirigible to fly it over the country and look for Bigfoot.
Well, that's a choice.
That'd
I don't know if that's the best way to go. Infrared.
His idea is that it's infrared cameras on it.
Okay, but the point is, I think there had been, some studies in plaster casts that he had done, and the guy apparently, from what I understand, really got interested in it because he could not refute what he as an expert was finding. So that piqued his interest, and then he began to put some of his scholarly weight behind the study of at least these footprints, and, gleaned information out of that was very hard to throw disrepute upon. So I think there are some that are doing this type of work, and I don't know how many of them are nutcases, but this one guy, he seems pretty straight and like he knows what he's talking about. What else do you guys know about that professor?
I know just a little bit about him, and one of the most recent things I've heard about him is this plan I think he's wanting to do a Kickstarter to build a small dirigible with infrared cameras and everything like that, and fly it over the Pacific Northwest to see if he could, because his idea is it'd be silent, it'd be high up, and if they were moving, he'd be able to track them with the infrared. Thing is, from 1,500 feet up, how are you?
Yep.
Did we lose James?
Come back, wideband.
I want to pick up where James left off, because this guy wants to fly over wilderness and look for heat signatures that he can claim are Bigfoot. But, I can even go even further. Show me a hair sample, a scat sample, a body, any physical evidence outside of a blurry heat signature photo, and you would have my attention. But until we see any of that, we have to be skeptical of any person out there studying Bigfoot on a scholarly basis, because every sample that has been brought forth to say that this is a Bigfoot sample has been proven to be false. I
don't know about every. I think there have been some that the testing's still out on, so you could be right. But I don't know if I can throw that in the category of every, but certainly the vast majority, yes.
Well, that brings up Melba Ketchum, right? I mean, she and her team have collected a lot of samples that are, who knows why they were collected or how, but
that was one of the complaints on her paper.
Yeah. And they did some kind of DNA testing, which some professionals thought was pretty ludicrous, but they found human DNA, which is no surprise if humans were collecting the samples, right? I mean, that would be something you'd expect if, especially humans who don't really know how to collect samples without contamination.
So it's just contamination.
Well, I mean, if you're making the claim that Sasquatch is a human subspecies, that's a pretty difficult claim to support right there. I mean,
I think they make that claim because it looks so human-like. And so that one would naturally think it is a subset of some type of humanoid or hominid that has, survived the passage of eons, much like they say like Nessie is some type of old fish or dinosaur that has lasted forever. I don't know if that's it, but I do find interesting, and I'm sure you guys think it's just nutcase stuff, but somebody did mention the perhaps supposed other dimensional aspect of this particular creature that we named Sasquatch. That, what if there is portals, permeable membranes into this 3 or 4D world that we live in, and we know there are other dimensions. It's not just theoretical. We know there are other dimensions, I believe. So what if something is finding a permeable input and out of this world upon will or whatever? There's been, if you don't talk about Sasquatch, but if you just talk about some of the very good, well-researched cases of UFO reports where there are objects that seem to come and go in. Example, not finding pieces of flesh or scat or something like that. An imprint is different. An imprint is a shadow of its presence it has left on this dimension. But scatological findings is a part of itself, and fur is a part of itself. And I'll just say this one other thing and then drop out for a bit, and we can discuss whatever you guys want on that. But I remember a case that Paul and I were involved in where a young man, and I believe, I think he had great veracity. This young man had pulled out of him a superficial object that had been stuck into his flesh. He had taken that object and put in a plastic bag and put that plastic bag under his wallet in a bureau overnight. And when he went to get that object, the plastic bag had been melted out where the object was, and that object was gone, as if it had teleported away. So I would submit that there is a possible, whether or not provable, there's a possibility that there are things that come in and out of this dimension, and while here, they can do extraordinary things because they are not captive to what we're captive to here as four-dimensional beings. So that's just my spiel on that. So tear that apart now. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah. I think first you'd have to have so many different variables satisfied before you can even get to the point that you're talking about. But one thing you said right before you trailed, right at the end there, was they wouldn't be, they would have to adhere to our understanding of physics, which I have a problem with, because if they, so hypothetically speaking, if this is true, if they come into our physical world, they'd be bound by our same physical laws. And by that very nature, they can be tested scientifically with the scientific method.
Right off the bat, I don't know that that's valid. If you come in here to this, if you come into this dimension, I don't know that it's necessarily a given that you are captive to what I, as a three-dimensional, four-dimensional being, are captive to. That first supposition may or may not be accurate. I don't know, but continue.
Our modern understanding of the physical universe assume that to be true, given that if you're within this physical environment, you have to obey its laws of physics. Until we have proof that something or someone can disobey those laws of physics, we have to go on that assumption as being true. So if this person or being interacts with our physical world, then we should be able to test it scientifically, which is what the scientific method is designed to do, is to test a natural world. So if they interact with our natural world and we can test it scientifically, we should be able to prove it scientifically. And the fact that we haven't proven what you've spoken of scientifically, at this point, it's just speculation and fanciful thinking.
And that's where I think the current scientific method fails us in newer physics. I think we are still trying to use a tool that works 90% of the time for most everything, but there is a period and a percentage where it cannot be valid because what we're asking it to test is different than what we are used to.
Okay, but isn't the primary claim of cryptozoologists that things like Sasquatch and Champ and Yeti are
and the Mothman.
Animals?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the Mothman. The Mothman is too weird, but
they're all pretty damn weird.
Although some people think the Mothman was just an owl, but
or a sandhill crane.
Yeah, Well, I mean, the people that saw the Mothman were not exactly trained scientists.
Yeah. The sandhill crane is a jab at David's partner.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, your point, Paul, was what now?
Well, my point was that the primary claim of cryptozoology is that things like Bigfoot are unknown animals. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Not. I mean, you can always invent some magic that makes it impossible to detect or impossible to find evidence for. Mm-hmm. But that's an escape. To me, that's a dodge. The question is, if you really think Bigfoot is a real animal mm-hmm. living in the forests of North America, then that's the claim, and we have to ask, what's the evidence for that claim? If you think that Bigfoot is this weird thing that we can't possibly understand, then maybe the answer is that's what it is. But and it won't leave poop, it won't leave bones, it won't leave hair. Well, I mean, then we're like just, but people make the same claim about ghosts, and every time we go to look at a ghost in a haunted house, we find nothing, right? So,
but have you guys who here on this panel has had unexplained anomalous experiences? Unexplained anomalous experiences. Okay, let's hear it. You tell. Who's me? Me. Who's James. Me talking?
That would be James.
Okay, James. So, do you want to share?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay.
When I was young, I grew up on a self-sufficient farm. And I mean, it was a few miles from any neighbor. And grew up, and we always had this story about a green hand man. And I don't know where it came from, just the story was he would come through, and if you saw him, bad things were going to happen. I thought it was just a way to keep us in the house at night. And we had an outhouse. We did not have running water. So if you had to go to the bathroom at night, you had to walk 100 yards down the hill to the outhouse. So I'll go out one night to the bathroom. When I come out, there's something green just walking out through the chicken yard. I have no idea what it is. To this day, I haven't got the foggiest idea what it is. So, and I think it's somehow related to the old family story of the green hand man.
Now, did you?
I went out.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, did you ever think later on, did it ever even occur to you to think, gosh, I wonder if somebody came from, a couple of counties away and put on a green outfit and decided to rummage through my yard that night? Did that occur to you?
That occurred to me, but the most likely explanation that occurred to me at the time was I've got two uncles and an aunt that are just a few years older than me, and they're kind of practical jokers.
Yeah.
So that was but I mean, to be honest, I have no idea what it was, but.
Did you mention that to anyone? Did you discuss it in your family? Was this talked about?
Yeah, I told my grandpa, and he made a point of locking the doors at night.
Uh-huh.
We couldn't go outside once the sun went down.
You would have kind of thought that your granddad would have gone and talked to your aunt and uncle and asked if they did something to scare the bejesus out of their little nephew.
You don't know my grandpa. He was very superstitious. He witched water wells, dowsed for people. Or he used to use different search methods for people. So no, he wouldn't have thought somebody was pulling a joke. He would have thought it was the old family story coming back around. Because if he thought it was a person, to be honest, he would have just walked out there and shot him. He would not have asked questions. That's the kind of guy he was. But yeah, go ahead.
Marsha, let me try to get to the crux here. Are you equating anecdotal personal experience with hard scientific evidence? Because I don't doubt that people have experiences that they can't explain. We all, on a certain basis, do. But to equate that with hard scientific evidence, this seems like a false dichotomy there.
Well, I know two things. One, we don't know everything yet. In fact, what we do know as scientists, what scientists and science does know right now, equates to a gnat's eye on a buffalo in the tundra. It is nothing. What is out there to know, what we do know in comparison, truly is nothing. And so we're hanging all our hopes on this little bit that we do know. I know that for a fact. Secondly, I know there's evidence, for example, on UFOs, and it's radar evidence of objects in the sky that are not ours because they defy physics. And so people discount that as evidence, but I will contend that is evidence. And you can choose not to look at it, and you can choose to cherry pick what one is going to accept for evidence. And that happens all the time. Cherry picking happens everywhere. But I would just say that I don't believe our current scientific method is adequate to deal with all the things that we're experiencing. And that's how I stand at this point. That's all we got, our current scientific method, but it ill suits in some cases. It's not a one size fits all.
But don't you think that opens up to a lot of fanciful and unprovable things?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. It's unprovable. There are a lot of things unprovable. There's many people who have seen ghosts and interacted with people that they know have passed on from their family. Some people will admit it, some people won't. But that is inexplicable and unprovable. Nonetheless, and although it's anecdotal, nonetheless, there is a great belief in either the afterlife or spirits that are somehow still retaining their personality and such coming through after they die. And no, it's not provable. And I understand what you're saying. And I agree with you. I agree with you to that point, up to my caveat.
Well, what I think what your caveat is doing is special pleading, because we can explain away. Well, Bigfoot doesn't leave any scat because it's a part of him, and he takes it back with him when he travels interdimensionally.
I'm just saying it's a possibility. I don't know that that's true. I'm not profiting that as a true statement. I'm saying that's what some people have put forward. I don't know if it's true or not. It could be crap. Literally, figuratively.
I think I take issue with you saying it's a possibility, because based on our understanding and on our scientific understanding of this universe we live in, it's not possible, because it would take a sheer amount of energy that would, like James said here in the chat, that would be measurable to some degree by some instruments we have. So again, it goes back to my original statement that they would interact with our physical world and we'd be able to test it. So by saying it's possible, I think does a disservice to what you're talking about.
All right. Understood. We can agree to disagree on that point. I think these things are possible. I can't explain them, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
can we
not
get
to
back?
say that something that can't be explained won't eventually be explained. Once the paranormal is able to be tested and researched through science, it stops being paranormal. It becomes normal.
Right. Now, James, you never asked me what my favorite cryptid was.
Well,
And I've
Really
got
an area that I like the Loch Ness monster. Well, let's go with that because it was kind of cool that it might have been a plesiosaur, but
yeah, I used to love the Loch Ness monster till I went to Loch Ness. There was a little museum in a charming little town called Drumnadrochit on Loch Ness, which by the way, Loch Ness is beautiful. I'd recommend going there. But I went to the Loch Ness Monster Museum, and I came out and convinced there was no Loch Ness monster. There's just not enough nutrients in that lake to support a big animal, and so
Yeah.
sorry, there's hardly any fish in that lake. There's a few fish.
And
You
a lot
would
of
need
eels.
because
Well, there's a few eel-
Nessie ate all of it, and now it's dying from starvation.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also there was a research project where they had cameras all over the lake for an entire summer,
Uh-huh.
and the day is very long there in the summer. It's the sun sets at like 10 o'clock at night and comes up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and they had cameras all over that lake, and they didn't see a thing that wasn't easily explained. So they did it for a summer. That was all the money they had, but if there was something surfacing from the lake during the day, they would have found it. They would have seen it, and they didn't see it. So, and a lot of the stuff that's in Loch, that the photographs and so forth have been debunked, come out as hoaxes. So,
right.
If you're going to have a lake monster, Champ is so much better than Nessie.
Yeah.
Well, it's right in his name.
Yeah.
So.
Besides, I love Lake Champlain. It's one of my favorite lakes. So it's a beautiful lake. Also up in Vermont, New York border, and it's bigger than Loch Ness. So, okay, guys, tell me why Champ is complete nonsense.
So Paul,
So
I think
that's your favorite call? Is Champ?
No, actually not. But I'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Paul, I think you hit on something pretty relevant here. And if you're researching the paranormal, wouldn't your first assumption be hoax, considering the sheer number of hoaxes that have been propagated? Instead of jumping immediately to the conclusion that it's something paranormal, if I was in that field, my first assumption would be, this is a hoax. So let's try to prove that it is a hoax first before we move on to anything.
Well, I put it differently. I said rule out a hoax. Show that there's something about it that couldn't be hoax.
Right.
And rather than saying, assume it's a hoax. I would never assume that. I would just say, well, okay, it could be a hoax. How could it be hoaxed? So how would I do it? Ask a magician, for example. How would they do it? How would they pull this off? Or somebody else who's good at fooling. I mean, the thing about hoaxing is hoaxers love to do hoaxes that that people think are impossible. So you have to be very careful with hoax. They wouldn't do it if they just thought if somebody would expose it in 10 seconds.
I think hoaxers are de facto sociopaths. If you get your jollies from doing something like that, you are de facto a sociopath.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the nature of the hoax, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure, it doesn't change the nature, but I'd like to find them all and squeeze the life out of the little bastards.
yeah, I mean,
Some of
he's
them
right.
aren't that little, Marsha. Trust me.
Yeah, well, I just that really, really muddies the waters.
But he's right.
everywhere.
There are a lot of hoaxes, and you can put on a ghillie suit and wander around in the woods. People think you're Bigfoot, right?
Like that poor guy.
some people
Like that
have.
poor guy in Minnesota.
And you should get shot for your troubles.
It's shot or run over. That's what's happening these
That's
days.
a Raj. That's a Raj.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do it here in Maryland, but it's got to be safer. But
Yeah, you can't have a gun in Maryland.
So then you also
What's that say about your profession if you're so easily fooled to thinking that someone who's hoaxing is real? So I wouldn't blame the hoaxer. I'd blame the person getting hoaxed. They want to believe so bad.
True.
So
Yeah. You've got to be discerning. You have to be discerning. If you aren't discerning, you're part of the problem too.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of hoaxes, and I don't think my guess is that most of the paranormal reports we get, or most of the cryptid reports, are not the result of hoaxes. They're just the result of
misidentification,
human perception.
Mm-hmm.
People people take a photograph with their deer camera, their game camera, right?
Yeah.
And they see something kind of large and
Blurry.
and blurry out,
They get a blurry
and
photo, and then you can't tell what it is.
Hey, that's the name of
Oh.
somebody's podcast, right?
Sounds like a cool show, guys.
So, but yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those things that when you're dealing with, like, okay, Marsha mentioned the plaster casts earlier.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lot of woodcraft, if you don't have a lot of expertise or experience tracking wildlife in not just going across, mud or sand, if you try to track a coyote across a lot of different types of terrain, the tracks are going to change appearance going from sand to mud to dirt to grass to rock.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how the animal's moving, it's going to change the appearance, the overall structure of it. They step on something hard, the paw is going to spread out more. Something soft, it changes its appearance. Taking the plaster casts, normally by the time anybody gets out to where those cast sites are, the tracks have deteriorated. They've weathered, they've eroded. More than one animal has stepped in that location because animals are creatures of habit, so they're going to follow the same tracks back and forth, and they're going to step repeatedly in the same area. It's going to highly modify what the original track looked like. And if you're not almost an expert at being able to distinguish, okay, at least 3 or 4 animals have used this trail or this or that or the other, you can get one imprint that looks a lot like a club-footed animal. Most of the tracks I've seen of Bigfoot looks like he's kind of clubfoot because all the toes are mashed together or bent to the side. But if you're not an expert in looking at these kind of things, you just going out and pouring plaster in that. So it's one of those things you have to have expertise, and then when you make the cast, making the cast is gonna change it. So
yeah.
Well, they're so easily fake nowadays. So, going back to the hoaxes, again, Paul, I don't want to assume. My first assumption would be, a hoax, but like you say, can this be hoaxed? And if it can be hoaxed, can I replicate it based on what I think a hoax would be? And if you can, then you should question the conclusion or question the evidence in front of you.
Yeah, I mean,
you always question the evidence, but don't. What's the old saying? Be open-minded, but not so open your brain falls out.
Well, you have to have an hypothesis, and you look at how the evidence compares for the hypothesis or not, the hypothesis being false, right? And if something could be hoaxed, then there's not enough of a likelihood ratio to change your mind about the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
So Paul.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. I was gonna say right quick. C-Webb's got to go ahead and leave. So I'd like to give him a chance to go ahead and normally our last thing in the show is any final words. So if you've got anything you'd like to say and a link to your show, maybe.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, James. I appreciate the invite. Sorry I couldn't stay longer. Got to be up really early in the morning, so I wanted to get some sleep. If you want to check out my podcast, it's paranormalskepticacademy.com. I take a look at those paranormal reality shows, and I dissect them scene by scene. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Also, CWeb619 on Twitter, and the Facebook page is Paranormal Skeptic Academy. So again, James, I appreciate it. Mike and I know Mike from way back from the Dumbass Media days.
All right. Good
podcast. I'll check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you, Chris.
Glad to see you, Chris.
I'll check that podcast out. Sure. Yeah. Sounds like fun.
So
Yeah,
Paul, you're
it's a
supposed
good one. I've liked all the stuff he's done.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marsha.
Paul, it's time you took a drink and tell us finally what your favorite cryptid is.
Oh, I
Yeah.
I hope you guys have heard of it. I bet James has. The Goat Man.
The Goat Man. Good Lord,
the
why? Why would that be
Goat
your
Man.
favorite?
Well, because that was
Any
a legendary.
cryptid that carries 2 axes.
Well, there are different stories about the Goat Man, but when I was growing up in East Texas, the Goat Man was a very live legend. The Goat Man could throw a tire half a mile. The Goat Man.
It's a bad dude.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with the Goat Man. The Goat Man was
no.
Now, okay, I'll take a drink for bad sound effects. Now, you guys heard the Goat Man, right?
Paul,
yeah, I have.
Was that the Fort Worth story?
The Fort Worth Goat Man. Well, that's where it was centered, but I was about 100 miles east of there. But
so he's of the Fort Worth Goat Man.
Is that the one that threw the tire down the hill, though?
Well, this guy apparently the legend varied depending on who you asked, but the Goat Man could throw a tire a really long way. Yeah.
Or was it Lake Worth? I'm not sure.
I think it was Fort Worth, which is the little city just west of Dallas. Actually a pretty good sized town. The Goat Man was seen around Fort Worth, seen around north central Texas quite a bit. By seen, I mean a friend of a friend of a friend
right.
heard about. But when I was growing up in East Texas, the Goat Man was people would talk in hushed tones about the Goat Man.
Jeez.
Oh, there's one of the most famous Goat Men is in Bowie, actually. The Goat Men of Bowie. That's around your all's neck of the woods, right?
Bowie,
Maryland?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. Now,
that's right next door.
That's the one that said that there was a scientific experiment gone awry where they were breeding goats in this backwoods scientific facility, and an explosion or whatever happened, and this Goat Man was formed, kind of comic book style. Took an axe and just started going and wailing on people's cars. After that, so he likes going to lovers' lanes and scaring kids who are making out.
I've been in Maryland for almost 20 years. I've not heard of that.
Yeah.
So, and
that's the story I grew up hearing in Arizona.
Bowie's about 10 miles from here.
You might hear about it now.
No, it's just following Paul is what he did. He did something to a goat when he was a teenager, and they're just trying to get him back.
Well, no, that was consensual.
Oh, hell. Okay. Well, now Paul is officially on a watch list somewhere.
Oh, my God, yes. Paul, you just sealed your doom with that statement. Lordy, the NSA knows you now. Oh, well.
No, the NSA, after I went off on a tirade one day, they know who we all are. Don't worry. So.
They have the satellites zoomed on Buck Field's house in Patagonia.
More than likely on that one. So, but okay, I think Paul is the first time I've ever heard anybody say that the Goatman was his favorite, and we had a Goatman type thing out in Arizona too.
Did you? Yeah. I'm 100% sure the Goat Man is one of these urban legends.
Well, what was the Minotaur, you guys? You remember the Minotaur from way back there? Wasn't it part goat? Wasn't the bottom?
No, part bull.
Minotaur is a bull.
Bull. Okay.
Minotaur was a bull. He was born of a queen after she slept with a bull
what was
because
the other creature?
She made the gods.
The one you're thinking of is Pan.
Yeah.
A satyr.
Yeah, so
satyr.
Where do those things come from? What mescaline were they taking back in the day what is the beginning?
They enjoyed fanciful stories just like we do. I mean,
That's quizzical.
Yeah, they were the followers of Bacchus, if I remember right, who was the god of wine and general debauchery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I've applied for that position, but have been turned down several times.
Yeah, you have to keep a job, so you can't do too much of that general debauchery stuff.
You got to have a friend on the inside of the pantheon.
If you could be a god at it, I mean, that presumably would be your profession.
Yeah, but that's an E7 position, Paul.
I'm just not deity material. Let's face it.
We just not too long ago talked to an author, J. Nathan Couch. I don't know if you guys have heard of him or not, but he has done some investigating all about goat men and goatman sightings, and he wrote a book called Goatman, Flesh or Folklore. We had him on the show, and he told us all about these things. There are goatmen everywhere, apparently. And what it seems to boil down to, which was really interesting to us, is that a lot of the stories will be connected to things like the Lover's Lane, don't go out, on this so-and-so road at night, because besides the fact that it's really curvy and dangerous, the goat man will get you. Don't go out to this high trestle, this bridge that is another dangerous place. And if you start seeing these stories time after time, you start realizing this figure of the goat man is sort of a way to keep kids out of harm's way. Like someone was saying earlier about the green-handed man for James. Was this just a way to teach
cautionary
kids?
Tale?
Exactly. Was it a cautionary tale or not? So that was something that we thought was very interesting. To kind of chisel away at the superficial story of that.
Yeah. And how many of the cryptids do you think actually started out like that, just as a way to keep the kids away from the water, keep them out of the woods, keep them away from their creepy uncle next door, just things like that?
Yeah, tons.
Or keep them from copulating in the park.
Yeah.
Well, it's not working. Clearly.
Hey, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, so I'll take anything that works.
Yeah, start working the goat man into the story there.
Tell her about Bowie.
Yeah.
Of course, you can always show her this chupacabra too.
Yeah, that's a perennial.
Now, tell me about chupacabra. How did that get started? Well, not that chupacabra.
Yeah,
that's a hyena.
No, he was actually no. I've caught a hyena.
Well, what was that you just showed? What was that picture?
Wait, hold on. What was a hyena doing in Oklahoma?
Trying to eat a dog.
There was a hyena in Oklahoma?
What it was doing in Oklahoma? It's an African animal, right?
We had a 3/4 grown African lion walking down the street.
Lord have mercy.
But no, I caught a hyena that was going after a dog one time.
Mondays, right?
It was actually Wednesday, but yeah. I'll come back to that picture in a second, but chupacabra is kind of interesting. Right after what was the name of that movie? Species came out.
Oh, yeah.
There was a report in Puerto Rico of a scaly, kind of a bat-like lizard creature, scaly wings, big red eyes, kind of similar to the creature from Species, that had come out and attacked a bunch of goats. And one called it a chupacabra, which in Spanish is goat sucker. I got a perv joke right there. But anyway, so after a few years, it migrated up to mainland, Mexico and U.S., primarily Texas. But the story, as it came up to the U.S., it morphed from this scaly, bat-winged, nightmare fuel, evil little son of a bitch to some sort of canid, a type of a dog. It became a skinny, scaly dog-like creature when it came up here. Most of the pictures, most of the times people have found one, it's been a dog with mange or a small coyote. The one that there was a family who had one trapped in a cage, and they were charging people like $5 to come in and look at it. It was a blasted raccoon. they finally got it tested. All these animals, when they've been tested, have been just normal, everyday animals that have had mange. And because of the stories of chupacabra migrating up with the Hispanic population, suddenly these mangy creatures have superpowers too. The picture I showed you was one I'd sent to Blake Smith of Monster Talk. In my current line of work, I deal with a lot of different creatures. I've had Bigfoot calls. I've had more than one chupacabra call. We had one gentleman who found a dog in the kennels that had mange really bad, and he got on the phone and started calling people, telling them they need to get up there and pull this chupacabra out right now so they can test it and get the reward. The one I showed you in particular, the guy brought it up to the facility I work at, handed it over to the front, and then demanded a reward for bringing us a living chupacabra.
Jeez.
What it was a Chihuahua with mange.
Oh, wow.
Which, if anybody's ever been around Chihuahuas, those are for...
Chihuahua, chupacabra, easily confused.
Okay, yeah, I actually, until somebody actually put those two words together like that, yeah, evil and made believe. Okay, yeah, I can see that.
I've seen Chihuahuas. They look like a cat could eat them for breakfast, right? I mean, they're not very big.
Anecdote. I have seen a 3-pound Chihuahua stop a rampaging 120-pound Great Dane. We caught the Great Dane, and then the Chihuahua tried to eat us.
You got to write a book, James. You got a book full of material there. You got to write a book.
Well, I can always talk. Like I said, I can always talk about my Bigfoot call. That seemed to get a laugh before the show.
Oh, wait a minute! I didn't hear about that.
Oh, what do you think, David?
Yeah, go for it. That's great.
Do it.
Okay, in the nature of my job, I get calls on. When I was in the field, I got calls on loose animals. You know, I had a black bear up in a tree and a pit bull 30 foot up in a tree. A lot of weirdness. You know, a lot of naked people.
Wait a minute.
On the door.
Okay.
Can
we talk about the naked people for a while?
Okay, well, knock on the door.
No, never mind.
A 300-pound trucker comes to the door without pants.
Oh, okay. But you can skip over that part.
Yeah. Okay. I got this call, and the person who was at the dispatch was a believer, and she said that there was a Bigfoot rampaging through a trailer park. And I am the skeptic in the facility I work at. I mean, I'm literally the skeptic. So, but they dispatch me out there, and I go out there, and there are people running and hiding and everything, and I'm kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Well, I finally see what's caused the call. And I get on the radio. I'm like, yeah, you need to get the cops out here. Why? Well, because it's a large, naked, hairy man running around the trailer park. Wasn't a Bigfoot. It was just a large, naked dude that was tweaking on something.
Now, I want you to know that at that point in my life, I was going through a lot. And I just lost it right there.
This was yesterday.
That dude, unfortunately, is stuck in my head the rest of my life. I will die. I will be on my deathbed.
There are some things you cannot unknow.
My question is, how hairy do you have to be mistaken for a Sasquatch?
Think Italian with a follicle problem. This guy was the definition of a hair shirt.
Okay, we get it. The rest of us don't have to share your suffering, James.
Trust me, I had to sit there and watch this guy till the cops showed up. I can go into a lot of detail on him.
I have a question here. Those of you who have podcasts that deal with these anomalous things, what is your thought on them? Is there any credence to it at all, or is it just misidentifications, sociopathy, and crazy myth? Like Dave, you of the blurry photos.
Like me, I'll tell you what. I kind of what you guys were saying earlier, Marsha. I think I agree with you. I think there are some things that are unexplained, that are possible, that we don't know about. Me personally, like when you asked a while ago, I haven't had any experiences. I really want to have an experience, but I haven't. And it seems like the more we do the research on the subjects that we talk about, the more mundane reasons there are to what people see and stuff. And it's all the anecdotal stuff. And for me personally, until I do have an experience that I can explain, I can't take the anecdotes as fact. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Nor should you.
Right. And I would love to have something happen that I couldn't explain and just it would screw me up for the rest of my life. That would be great. I mean, then I'd have stories. But as it stands, I have to stand behind the science of it, right? Like you can't take anything as fact if it's not provable, if it's not testable, if you can't reproduce it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's where our podcast comes from too. We love the stories. We approach everything with an open mind, and we'll listen. If someone says, I have this encounter, we're more than happy to listen to that. And then we can say, okay, what could it possibly have been? If it could have been something paranormal, or it could have been a barn owl, which is what one of our recent episodes we were talking about the Flatwoods monster, and one of the explanations that people had for it was there was this monster that was seen in the woods back in the 50s, and one of the explanations was that it was just an owl, and it's a weird. Say what?
Because they shot at it and they thought they hit it, but it kept moving around. I can actually see that dealing with like great horned owls.
Well, this one they didn't even have a chance to shoot at it. They just shined the flashlight and it made this sound and started, as they put it, floating towards them. And then they all busted ass back, down the hill that they were on. So all they have was this moment, and you think, well, they're talking about this 7-8 foot tall monster. They said it had all this stuff on the bottom of it that made it float. Maybe there was a glowing. Its eyes were glowing. It had like these short, stubby, taloned hands out in front of it, and it just screeched at them.
And that's an owl.
And we did some research on it, and we listened to what barn owls can sound like, and it is horrifying. These things will make you piss your pants.
I used to have a pet one.
I mean, it's unbelievable. But you think owl? Oh, who? That's all. It's just an owl. No, dude. These things will be like, ah! It is mortifying. So, so we like to keep the open mind, but approach it, as best we can with saying, what are all the angles to this? So that answers your question, Marsha.
It does. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
I mean, I love your tagline, David, on that show, in that it's exploring the unexplained and explaining the unexplored.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. So if you guys have not heard their show or C-Webb's or Mike Bohler's, I really recommend all of them. I mean, they're all really well done. Mike, of course, does more of the conspiracy stuff, and we've already been going around an hour and a half, so we're not going to have a whole lot of time to get into how conspiracies tie into the monsters. But
too bad. We neglected that.
Yeah, I was trying to, but then we kind of got off on the existential bit of evidence and then came back around. But which isn't a problem. It's tangents are tangents are almost enforced around here. But,
and I wanted Marsha I also wanted Marsha to be a devil's advocate. So she's done a good job at that.
You mean Bigfoot advocate? We're not bringing religion into it. This is
the New Jersey Devil's Advocate.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that.
The unexplains advocate. That's what I am, the unexplains advocate, to a degree. To a degree. There's a lot of ignorance out there. There's no doubt of that.
Yeah. I'm not going to say there's not things that aren't explained, but it's just like one thing with me is looking at, like, just because I've written so much on Bigfoot over the years, just because you hear a rock hit the top of your house doesn't mean a Bigfoot threw it. There's a lot of animals that squirrels will throw rocks like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, yeah.
Ravens and crows actually use tools. They will pick up a rock that weighs, a quarter of a pound, which is a pretty good sized rock, and they will drop them on top of a roof because they've put a clam or something hard shelled up there and they're trying to crack it. So ravens are scary smart.
Before we run out of time, though, I want to hear from the conspiracy guy. I want to know what the number one conspiracy is that most people report that he thinks could have credence. Not just the number one nutcase stuff, but the number one conspiracy thing that you think has credence or validity. Anything,
Should we have
Mike?
to leave the nutcase out of this?
No, whatever.
That's a very tough one.
Oh.
It's a tough question. Like I said, I don't delve too deep into the paranormal or the cryptids.
But what conspiracies do you delve into?
Pretty much anything that. Actually, I've done more. I've been mostly dealing with the big ones, the 9/11 and stuff like that, and there's what I keep finding that there's kind of a psychological backing to many of these conspiracies, and so trying to find something. See, like I tend to believe that would be. Gosh, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this. Well, see, there's a lot of, because I wanted to try to relate back to some of the government stuff, because some of the stuff I come across, now there's I just had it in my head. Northwoods, Operation Northwoods. This was a government, this was a plan to get us into a war with Cuba. It was they were going to fly an airplane into Cuban airspace, have the Cubans shoot it down. It'd be full of Americans, that type of thing. The 9/11 people like to use it, but this was really it was a real attempt by the government, and it was really more of a when you actually read the documents, it was more like a brainstorming. How do we provoke the Cubans into attacking the United, or provoking the Cubans, or giving us a reason to go after Cuba? And the thing was, cooler heads prevailed and says, no, we can't do this. This is ridiculous. We don't have the technology. We don't have it. Right in the document it says, because they wanted to use remote controlled airplanes. They said we don't have the technology to do that. This, of course, we're talking in the 60s. There's probably, I'm sure there was some technologies being worked on. I think World War II, there was a technology attempted that killed one of the Kennedys. There was a mission that they were going to try to remote fly a bomber. But anyhow, but the technology wasn't there. It was so. The government is capable of doing some stuff, and they can. But I think it's until for me, I have to have evidence that. There's a lot of stuff about the Area 51 where we got all the spaceships. Wright-Patterson's supposed to have all the alien bodies there, but. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence. There's a lot of stuff like that, but not enough to say. There's no piece of paper. There's no. We haven't. There's just nothing. Not a lot there to say. yeah, that's true or that's not true. So I mean, I'm kind of an aliens. If there was something to happen or something that was real, I hope it's the aliens. I hope aliens are visiting us and stuff like that. I need
Yeah,
more
the
proof.
aliens beat Sasquatch for interest, in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Goatman too, Paul.
Well, I'm just talking about what my favorite is because it's from my youth, you know. It has nothing to do with whether I think it's real or not.
Okay.
I love
Good that we
mythology.
cleared that up.
Mythology is fun and good and healthy. It's just you have to recognize it for what it is.
I agree, Paul.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, like, aliens are kind of their own real niche because on top of just aliens, you've got visitations, you've got the conspiracies involving them sending messages or controlling governments or the reptilians. You've got of course, anal probings, which I don't understand why you come across the universe to shove something up somebody's butt. But anyway, teach their own, right?
Hey,
Yeah, I
don't
needed
judge.
money
Don't judge.
back in college. So don't you think it should have been E.T. probe home? Really, at the end of that movie.
Oh,
there you go with your
okay.
your heteronormative talk. All right.
There's
We have
nothing
officially
normal about hetero
devolved
anymore.
now.
No, we have not gone quite that far. Trust me.
Ah,
We can go much farther. So it can get bad. Trust me. Week before, I was showing a picture of good night. What's his name? Sean Connery in that red outfit from the sci-fi show.
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea how we Zardos or something like that.
Zardoz,
yeah.
And the thing is, none of us have any idea really how we got there. We were just showing Sean Connery and the crotch hugger. And yeah.
Which is not as bad as Giorgio's hair, by the way, but
all right. Well, I see the time on the wall is 7:35, and since I have a shortage out here in pure northern Michigan of bandwidth out the little burg I live, I'm chewing it up. So since we've devolved to crotch talk, I'm probably going to just step off here, gentlemen, and you knock yourselves out. All righty?
That's Paul's next podcast.
Crotch talk.
Welcome to Crotch Talk.
I'll be there. All right,
Zardoz, greatest movie of all time or second?
Au revoir. It's been nice talking with you and meeting you.
Yeah. Nice meeting you, Marsha.
Have a good night. Right,
you
bye-bye.
So, we covered a lot of territory and didn't get anywhere. That's kind of interesting for tonight.
You know what? That's how all this research goes, man.
Unfortunately, a lot of times when you're doing, like I said, I've written a couple of blogs about it. Webb, Chris used one of my blog posts for his first Bigfoot episode. And, I mean, it is literally a circle down a rabbit hole going into a freaking mirror. I mean, it's just, you have one little bit of anecdotal evidence that somebody throws out there. And then the next, and you have, and the cool thing about cryptids, what I think is so fascinating about them is that you have pareidolia, you have misidentification. On some instances, you have conspiracies like, oh, they're just hiding because they don't want you to know that there's unknown animals out there because it'd mess up your worldview. You have, there's actually a Christian bent to trying to find a lot of these cryptids, because they think it's going to destroy the theory of evolution. It's kind of a bit odd to me. It's just like, no, that just opens up a whole new venue that we can study. But, cryptids have all this interesting, all sorts of psychology and, physical science and environmental science all tied into it. And yet you get one guy who says one thing, and every report for the next 20 years is just a mirror of that first guy's quote. and trying to sort out what has actually happened is it's like Mike, did a couple of shows on Pearl Harbor, and I would imagine it's pretty similar to trying to sort through everything that went on back then. I'm just not 70, 80 years removed from it. I'm 20 years removed from it, but it's still trying to sort through everything.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's fascinating. I love the cryptids. Paul and I have talked a handful of times about them. And I have a background where I do deal a lot with, animals. And I would love it if somebody would just bring in a Bigfoot or a goat man or, a nymph is actually what I'm hoping for. But anyway, I'll settle for a satyr or something like that. But, if somebody could bring in an actual chupacabra, a Bigfoot, that would be the coolest thing ever to me as somebody, with biology and background. That would be the coolest thing ever. I wish they would come in. Unfortunately, it's just a mangy dog or somebody's uncle they didn't want to feed that week. It's just always something really weird, but never the actual animal that they're hoping for. And I know these stories like the Loch Ness goes back to, who is it? Not St. Patrick, but St. Christopher. I mean, some of these stories go back a few hundred years, but there's never any. Just somebody bring me a flipper or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Mummified eyeball. And that's what there's a weird thing that happens with cryptids when you go back that far in history. They sort of morph of what they are, what people's explanations of them are, and the paranormal itself to a degree, because hundreds of years ago there were fae folk and fairies that were running amok, and that's how people explained away a lot of things. In different cultures, that would be explained differently as well. Like in some Middle Eastern cultures, things that went awry were blamed on jinn. DJINN, the genies, as we would call them these days.
That's not DJN. That's jinn.
Jinn. And
Middle Eastern DJ.
The DJ Jinn, DJ Jazzy Jinn. But then the more modern you get with it, it'll form, and depending on what the cryptid in question is, that can change as well. But for jinn and to a certain degree, some of the fae folk maybe became angels in the Middle Ages, and angels and demons, things like that. It took on a more religious bent to it, and then you come up to the 20th century. We've got aliens coming in now. Things that happen to people and are unexplained sometimes get grouped into the alien bucket. Now, that's not to say there aren't still demons and angels kicking around that people explain away, and even the fae folk. It just sort of morphs and adds on as as time goes by.
Yeah. Well, it's like what was his name? I'd seen a quote for him the other day. Basically, you can never completely disprove something doesn't exist. There's always that extremely minuscule something exists. And I try to keep like you said earlier, I try to keep an open mind. If I will happily go out and look for Bigfoot or Chupacabra or, something like that. I will help. I have offered more than once to Bigfoot groups around here to go out and help them find them. Because I think if I can find them, it would be cool. But in all honesty, when you look at the fact that we have found, fish and frogs and birds and bats that are just a few millimeters in size. I mean, they have a bat, the bumblebee bat, that is only a few millimeters in size, weighs a couple of grams. And they found him in Peru. And then you have the bee hummingbird, which is, just about as small, and they found him in Papua New Guinea or something like that. When you can find animals that small in places that are so remote, so unexplored, so dangerous, how come we can't find these bigger creatures? If there is going to be a cryptid anywhere on the planet, my money would be on it's going to be in the ocean.
Yeah.
Because the ocean's still largely unexplored. So if there's going to be a creature, and I don't think there's a megalodon. Thank you, Animal Planet, for stoking the hopes, but yeah,
there's always
you ruined it just like with the mermaids. But there's not going to be a megalodon. You have coelacanth and a few other animals that are supposed to have been extinct that have turned up. And that's the other thing, is that somewhere there'd have to be a fossil record for all these creatures that people say exist. Because the coelacanth, a lot of times the Bigfooters like to point out the giant panda. Oh, no one knew it existed until we went over there in the late 1800s and 1900s and found one. No, there were hides, there were bones, there were, there is a record of these creatures in the fossil record.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as cool as cryptids are, unless they are alien or transdimensional, or Stephen King has the power to bring things alive from his dreams or something like that,
Oh yeah, he does, man.
But I'm just saying, unless there's something that are new to this planet, new to a recent massively horrible mutation, which is why things you hear about, like have you ever seen the show what is it, River Monsters with Jeremy Wade?
Yeah.
He goes around and actually hunts for monsters. And unlike the Finding Bigfoot crew, he actually finds these things. Tigerfish is the best image of all. Fish with...
They're just really, really big fish, right? I mean,
with teeth. The
tigerfish is a fish with teeth like this.
Oh, they're disgusting. I hate teeth in fish. It's just gross.
Have you seen the nut chomper fish? The piranha with flat teeth that will castrate men.
Oh yeah,
but Jeremy goes out there and he actually finds
I'm much better now,
the monsters. But Jeremy will go out and actually find these monsters, and that's the thing I like about him, is that he says, I'm looking for monsters, but he's a biologist, and he will take his knowledge. He'll granted, he listens to the folk stories, he listens to the tales, combines it with his knowledge of the fish that live in that area, the animals that are found there, goes out and finds some truly horrendous, evil-looking fish. And so that's pretty cool. And if you could do that, or have a random mutation from like Blinky from The Simpsons.
Well, Fukushima. We might be seeing some.
Blinky, yeah, I remember Blinky.
Yeah. So Godzilla may actually end up being a documentary.
Yeah.
But if
no, Godzilla is a denial of physics.
Well, comparatively, the original one was more reasonable. Because he was only like 50 feet tall. The new one's 480 feet tall.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
Yeah, but no, I mean, that if there can be a random single generation mutation that something crops up that would be not in the fossil record, I mean, that is highly, highly unlikely. But if it were to happen, okay. But yeah, for everything that's all these cryptids that are out there, there's no record of them in the fossils anywhere. At least not that I'm aware of. I don't know if you guys know of anything.
No, I mean, we would fully expect, if there's a population of Bigfoots in North America, they should have bones in several layers of clay down below.
Which I think Gigantopithecus is what they're trying to tie Bigfoot to through the fossil records.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about Gigantopithecus. But anyway, I'm no expert. But
I think
I'm not either.
Yeah, I think one of the obvious thing is with a Bigfoot there have to be a population to keep
right.
So there would have to, there would have to be a breeding group, maybe, I don't know, but since we don't, we just got blurry photos of Bigfoots. We don't know how.
Everything tonight is an ad for your show, David.
That's a drink. We got people drunk already. Right?
I don't know, you guys. It really sounds cool. I have to check this out.
I was going to say, already had two.
I should hope that no one would actually drink alcohol as a result of the show.
If you are, please make sure that you are of age and follow all the rules and do not drive home. Right.
Do not drive home.
Yeah. Do not drive home. Just find a nice park bench.
That's right. When you're done listening to this at the bar.
And take all your clothes off and run through a trailer park.
No, I don't need that call again. I live in Oklahoma. People run through trailer parks all the time.
Yeah, that's just Tuesday.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I'm glad this is Friday.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm fascinated by the cryptids. I always have been. They're just really interesting. I was trying to find the breeding population because I actually researched into that, and I think if you don't care about inbreeding, if you want to pretend you're Arkansas, it's like 1,000 members of a species. But if you want to avoid inbreeding, there's an actual number, and I want to say it's closer to like 2,000 to 4,000 minimum. And part of the problem with like Bigfoot or Chupacabra, definitely, Loch Ness Monster, you couldn't hold 2,000, and there's no way in hell it could be a plesiosaur because one, when plesiosaurs existed, the loch was still under a glacier, and two, the necks of a plesiosaur don't move in the way that people say that the Loch Ness Monster does. This is the newest thing I've been hearing, is that a plesiosaur's neck is designed to go side to side to bite prey. That way it's not designed to curve up in that S that you see in like surgeon's photo. So I'm digging through a couple things right quick to try and find it. So,
yeah, well,
I curse a lot in my older blog posts too.
I'm pretty convinced that there's no evidence of a plesiosaur in Scotland anyway.
If you ignore inbreeding, then 500 to 1,000 animals would ensure their survival. If you take that into account, and let me see, roughly with no conservation effort, you're looking at about 4,100 animals minimum.
That can interact. They're close enough to each other to interact. It can't be spread over a continent.
That's the other thing. They have to be within a reasonable distance. And you look at where the Bigfoot sightings are. They blanket the entire country. So either there's one Bigfoot in each of these spots, but then people report family groups. They can't be that. If they were completely nomadic, you would see them moving through a general area. You would see them moving because these things are supposed to be massive.
They'd have to cross roads. They'd have to go.
Right. Well, my question is, like, here in Oklahoma, when we had some severe drought and wildfires, not wildflowers. We always have those wildfires. They actually ended up upping the estimate of our black bear population because the black bear started coming out of the woods, going into people's swimming pools and stuff like that to get water. In California, where it's supposed to be, see if I can do Bobo's voice. It's real squatchy. No, that failed horribly. But anyway, in areas that's supposed to have a high Bigfoot population, don't you think during the wildfires in California and the droughts and everything, these things would be just coming out of the woods in droves? The forest would look like a shag carpet. It'd be like a Star Wars convention where Chewbacca is going to be there. That's what it would look like. So, that's the thing, especially with the population numbers having to be as high as they are. And the same thing, it doesn't just apply to Bigfoot. It goes for Chupacabra, Goat Man, Mothman, his cousin Gothman, all of them. It just goes for all the cryptids that are out there. There has to be a fairly large number, unless they're like the Medusa jellyfish and immortal.
Well, probably not.
Right. Yeah, actual. So that one.
So I think we reached the conclusion of probably not for poor old Bigfoot.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure if I'm not related to him, somebody would have ran into him by now.
Well, if anybody's related to him, I am, but and I'm not. So, Grandpa documented the family very well.
Yeah, my family history gets a little murky. So normally about the second beer, it gets kind of murky.
But you guys aren't 8 feet tall, so.
No, we're closer to hobbits. Harry is short.
Now, hobbits are known to be real, right? I mean, they're science has proven that
we're short. We have Harry feet, and we like second and third breakfast. I mean,
I like that too. But
I was happy when Denny's offered that. But anyway, they just told me to go back out and put shoes on. So now I was gonna say, I know you guys haven't listened to Blurry Photos, but towards the end, they have a tradition. David, would you like to throw out a pun?
Oh, man. Let's see. What all we talk about? So our tradition is that Dave and I, my co-host and I, will come up with 2 puns. We'll do a pair of puns each based on what we've talked about throughout the episode, throughout the night.
Yes, I'm inducing alcoholism.
Well, we need each pun is a drink, but I only have 1 drink left. So.
Well, David is the master, so we'll let him tell the pun. My jokes are just horrible and fall flat on their face.
I don't know if you can call it a master of puns. That's
you're better than I would be.
Well, I
Mike would probably tried a few good ones.
I do know of a there's a fish that's out there that some people have seen. They can't really get a picture of it. It's hard to find, but it's people just swear it's out there swimming around. And the weird thing is, it's a type of fish that not only is it scaly, but it's also really hairy. And people just all over the world claim to see the Basquatch.
Greg.
Oh, I love that. That was excellent, man. I was going to try to get you to talk. Maybe you could throw it out real quick because I love this one. During your Miss Cryptid, I think it was like 2013. You had the Bat Squatch.
Oh yeah.
You'll love this one, Paul. I promise.
There were a couple of instances of people citing what they lovingly termed a bat squatch because it was a flying hairy hominid with leathery wings and a purplish color of all things. But some folks in Pennsylvania and then up in the Pacific Northwest claimed to see what they called a bat squatch flying around. It was one of these things where it's like they're camping and they see something at the edge of the fire and they scream at it screams at them, it flies away, they pee their pants. I mean, it's classic.
Yeah, that's legal in Colorado now, by the way.
The peeing your pants or the other part?
Well, whatever it takes to make you see a Basquatch.
No. I'm pretty sure there's some strain of weed out there called Bat Squatch.
Bat Kush.
This weed, man, it gets you batshit crazy. But anyway,
I got an hour, 43 minutes on the clock here, James.
All right, I will.
You're gonna set a record.
Yay! All right, I'll go ahead and wind it up. So, I mean, this has just been fun. I always enjoy talking to Mike and to you, Paul, and it's great getting to meet Webb and David, and great getting finally to talk to Marsha after hearing her a few times on the show. So I'm always excited when I get to speak to people that I I greatly respect and I enjoy what they do. So, okay. First of all, before we leave, as is tradition on our show, any final words? Starting with David.
Yeah, I think it's a fun topic. Just cryptids in general. Obviously, we can talk ad nauseum about this stuff. And like you said, be open-minded but discerning about stuff. Do you want me to plug the stuff now, or should we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can go ahead, and we'll include some links on the page.
Great. You can find more stuff from me and my co-host Dave at blurryphotos.org. We're on iTunes. We do a weekly show, like I say, and we talk about all this stuff and try to do it, lighthearted, open-minded, but also try to get to the bottom of stuff. And then we may throw in an accent or dialect here or there too. So.
And don't forget to tell the ladies from Candy Chat I say hi.
Yep, the Candy Chat ladies are they've got some stuff in the works that's pretty big. So I'll definitely let Betty and Tab know. But thanks for having me on, James. Thanks for asking me, and good to meet all of you guys.
Yeah, nice to have you. Great to finally meet you. So okay, Mike, any final words?
Oh, nothing. I can't think of anything. It was nice to meet you, David. And then Sandra. I've known Webb for a while through the Dumbass Media Network. Another cheap plug. So let's see.
Which, if we're following the rules, that's 3 drinks right there.
Right. So all I gotta really say is,
man, I'm out.
All I gotta say is I've got the cowbell, so we've got cowbell. From
okay.
Yeah, we've got a lot of just for those who are just now joining us because of our guests. Cowbell is a running gag on this show lately. So is Donald Trump. Of course, he's been a running gag for about 30 years. We've got a couple others, and I can't think of what they are off the top of my head. We have a series of just.
Don't worry, we'll come up with some.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm feeling a bit of a fever, and I think the prescription is more cowbell.
David, can you do a walk-in?
Babies, when I'm done with you, you'll all be wearing golden diapers.
That was excellent.
That's pretty good.
Oh, I appreciate that, man.
I need even mean.
I need more. Doesn't matter. It came from walking. Okay, Paul. As a guest on your own show, do you have any final words?
Oh yeah, I think that James is a great host and should be the host every time from now on.
Got my vote.
I think we definitely have. We set the record for the longest show so far. And I just want to put in a plug for one of my other favorite cryptids, which is Champ, who lives in Lake Champlain up in upstate New York. Everybody go visit Champ and give her some love because she's feeling kind of lonesome and
just make sure she consents.
Not existing very much lately, so Also, I would like to thank James for doing this and organizing it, and I hope everybody enjoys. This is kind of Halloween show, so we decided to be a little bit lighthearted and a little bit.
We got a little
crazy.
heavy for a little bit,
and anything I said about my past,
it's all in the police records.
Indiscretions was completely mythical, and
no, it's not.
That's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank everybody for coming on. As I said earlier, it is always fun talking to Mike and to Paul. And it was very nice meeting you, David. Nice meeting Marsha and Chris. Sorry they couldn't stay for the full show. like I said, we got a little heavier than I'd actually intended. I was figuring it's going to be real lighthearted. We do, and but it was still a very interesting conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it and had fun. This has been episode 31. So recording, as Paul said, it's our Halloween episode. So 31 on the eve of most of you guys' time right now. It is actually now Halloween day.
It's actually Halloween here on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Midwest, so it's variable. We don't have Halloween, we have hell houses. But for the links to everybody's shows, for more information and for some interesting pictures and information about Goatman, so go to unseenpodcast.com and you can find links to all the previous shows, all the hosts, all the panelists. And we will see you 1 week from today. Do we have a topic yet on this, Paul? Or is it still up in the air?
It's still up in the air. There's if anybody has any interest in what the topic is, they should contact us. You can email us at unseenpodcast@gmail.com.
Okay. And as I said, we will see you guys next week. So enjoy our outro music. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.